It's a Monday on the 13th of July, 2020. And what's on a lot of people's minds right now at this point in July is this concept of or question of whether we go back to traditional schooling shortly. And a lot of school districts are planning. So, and a lot of parents are trying to decide what it is that they're going to do. So I'm going to share with you some best practices for making that decision and hopefully give you a little bit of help to do that well. I'm going to remain agnostic as to whether or not you should open traditional schools in a traditional way. You have the full range of possibility, and everything that I'm going to talk about is applicable to that full range of possibility. I'm going to start with the simplest small thing you can do and work up through two layers of complexity. In the beginning, it will be about the way that we think and move this forward. At the end, I'll be talking to anyone that might be running a meeting or planning session that would be designed to determine whether or not you are going to open your school, and then if you were, how to do that as safely as possible, and if you weren't, how to do that in such a way that you still got the socialization and academic needs of your student population met while taking care of parents who have to go to work. So those are the issues that we all know that we have to deal with, and there probably is no perfect solution that would be a social solution that we would all agree to, but there are ways to increase the likelihood that you get as best a result as possible. So let's start with the simplest of things. We have opinions about whether or not we should open schools, and if from those opinions we will have a proposal to others. We will suggest to others what it is that we might do. Now, when those suggestions are brought forth, the unproductive way to deal with those suggestions is to go binary on it, to suggest that the right way to do it is either yes or no. And the problem with that way of thinking about it and talking about it and playing with it is that what will occur is we just get into arguments, right? And that's not really where we want to go. We don't want to just be in argument. So better than that would be to take any proposal that we look at and evaluate that proposal with an intention to improve it. So what if instead we improve? What if instead we get away from the problem way of looking at it and just say, well, I don't like that or I do like that, and argue with each other, which never brings our full creative potential forward, and instead think about how might we improve whatever the proposal is. So best practices when you're doing this kind of work with a community is to take, or a school district or a senior leadership team that's trying to work this stuff through, is to evaluate using a particular tool that we call Praise First, and it has a very strong pattern that supports the neurology of improvement. The neurology of improvement. It gets our brain to increase the likelihood that we could come up with solutions to the problems inherent in the proposal that we will want to say no to the proposal because of. Rather than just doing that, there's a better practice. So I'll show you that tool first. That tool is called POINT. It's an acronym. The P in POINT stands for pluses. So the first thing you do, as hard as it might be to do, because you might have a bias that causes you to say, I don't want to say anything positive about school opening, or I don't want to say anything about positive about school not opening, right? Well, be mature here. We're trying to find the best possible outcome that we can. So what you do is when you look at any proposal, say your school district is saying that, well, what we're going to do is limit class size, or you're going to do this A-B solution that people are doing, where you're in school for half the time and doing virtual the other half time, whatever the pattern might be that has been proposed. It won't be perfect. And instead of arguing about it, you can't do that because you can't do that because, let's solve the problems inherent in whatever it is. Or maybe in your school they're saying, no, we're not going to open, we're going to go wholly virtual. And people are saying, well, you can't do that because what are you going to do about parents and going to work and childcare and all that? These are very complex issues that we're trying to solve. So first is, what do you like about it? And you actually list that. and you do that in a factual way. Is there anything good in that proposal? And if you cannot find anything good in the concept of whatever it is somebody's suggesting, whether that's all virtual in the classroom, some families are saying, well, heck, I'm going to homeschool. Some families are saying, I can't afford to homeschool, but what if we created a learning pod as a group of families? We isolate, we do our social distance work such that our families are considered one large family, and we are all very careful when we go out into the public, go to work, and we come together, and maybe one parent who can run the homeschooling aspects of this, or schooling at home, or unschooling, whatever the method you might choose to use, does that. There's all different ways. So what do you like about the proposal that you've heard? And you list those things. Those are the things that essentially you want to think about. If we improve this proposal, what do we want to make sure we keep? What are the good parts of it that we want to keep? And it won't work unless we get past that part of us that thinks about, I've got to win. So if I think, no, we shouldn't open school, or I think, yes, we should open school, I can't let you know any of the things that might be good about your point of view. Well, okay, stay stuck. That's what will happen. But if we do pluses first, then what we do is we take a look at the opportunities, the secondary benefits. And we list those too. We ask ourselves, what are the secondary benefits of doing this? So let's say, just going in different, I'm not going to do it because I want to stay out of the content. I have opinions too. I have my biases. But what are the secondary benefits that might come from doing it the way that we've described, that don't have anything to do with education or preventing COVID transfer, but might be benefits otherwise? As an example, I'm sure that a lot of us have gotten more comfortable with virtual learning than we were before. That's before the pandemic. And we've gotten more comfortable teaching virtually and things like that in school districts, whatnot. So that's a secondary benefit. It's not the primary purpose of doing this so that people can get comfortable learning this way, but it may be an outcome. And it may be the other way too. People say, no, I'm really clear. I don't like learning this way. That's fine too. Now, only now, and this is why we call it phrase first, because you do these two things before you get critical. Now what you do is you surface the issues, the weaknesses, the concerns, the things that aren't right, that won't be perfect with this proposal. But there is a trick when you surface those weaknesses, and the trick is this. You're going to surface those weaknesses in the form of a question, and it's not the form of a question like this. How come you're so stupid as to think that that will work? Yeah, that's a question, but that's not the kind of question you want to do. You want to do the question structure such that invites creative thinking to solve the problem that you see, or the issue that you see within the proposal. It's the difference between saying that will never work, and your brain will naturally go through the process neurologically to try to find evidence to support why your point of view is correct, that it will never work. Or you can instead say, how might we get that to work? Well, you may be pessimistic about a positive result, but you're more likely to receive that wisdom and the connection of neural knowledge in your brain and with others as well if you ask the question in the right way. And there's 4 stems that the research tells us work really well for us. And those stems are how to keep younger kids keeping their mask on all day. That's a pretty interesting challenge within it. I don't know that I know the solution to that, nor have I seen it proposed well, so that's clear. Or how might we handle the time that people need to go to the bathroom? Or how might we increase hand washing? Or how might we make sure that every kid always has alcohol sanitizer in their pocket? In what ways might is just another version of the same. And the best of them all, in my opinion, the best stem for a creative question is, we'll call it wombat. What might be? Yep. all the ways. This one is the most divergent question of the bunch. What might be all the ways? So let's say you're concerned about, teenage kids in a school, and, we all feel invincible when we're teenagers to a certain degree. And so the old classic of you can't keep two kids apart that want to be together. And so you get cross-contamination because of that. So what might be all the ways to deal with young lovers during going to school at a COVID pandemic? Now, the interesting thing about what mentally that question will do is might allows you to be incorrect in your divergent thinking. It might not. And all the ways invites a tremendous amount of volume. So school district administrators, facilitators, people that are doing this planning, when you're asking the community to strengthen it or evaluate it, take them through a process where they do praise first, and then look for where the holes are in your plan or the weaknesses in your plan, and then invite from them, excuse me, what their best thinking might be in terms of moving that forward. So what I'd encourage you to do is point as a way of evaluating, if that's the best you can do. Now let's chunk up one more level. Let's imagine that you're still in the phase where you're trying to create those concepts, create those proposals that people might evaluate. What's the best practice? Well, rather than, excuse me, thankfully I'm the only one in the office. So the best practice for evaluating or creating rather a plan like this is not to do it in one giant large group all at the same time. So instead, form small groups of 2 to 3 people that can get along in their thinking, and have them create a plan to solve some particular problem or even the larger plan that you might have, and write that plan up as a concept, writing it up in the structure of point. So what we see ourselves doing is blah, blah. That's the headline. And then a little narrative below that headline. In order to do this, then we'll do that, and here's how it's going to work on the schedule, blah, 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 blah. What's good about this overall is, do some pluses, some secondary benefits that might come from this overall, do some opportunities. Some weaknesses in our plan that we recognize are these, but we don't have a solution for them yet, or maybe you do. And these are the solutions to the most common weaknesses, or these are the things we'll need your help with moving forward. Now, imagine this. Imagine a school board or an executive team in a school district or at a university that was developing multiple proposals in groups of 2 or 3 with the same structural format. And I can send you something that gives you that, we call it a pitch document. You send me an email, I'll make sure you get those things, or maybe I'll put links to download it in the comments below on this video. We're doing this as a Facebook Live, but we'll share it in other ways. So what you do is you put those up on a wall where people can look at them, read them, and evaluate them. And here's the hack. It's a beautiful hack. They're going to vote on which one they think is the most productive, the one that they think is the tightest one to start with. And you don't let them vote on their own. They have to trust the wisdom of the group, the wisdom of the hive mind, the wisdom of the crowd, if you will. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have each, maybe you've got 5, maybe you've got 10, who knows, different concepts of how we're going to open the school or how we're going to not open the school and still get kids to learn, whatever. And it's a large concept. It's got more than one simple thing to it, and you've written it all out as best you can. So I'm looking at the wall and I'm shopping through those different things. Now I've got the one I worked on and I think it's pretty good, right? But if it is, others will too, right? So I'm looking for the one that's the second best, so I'm looking for the one on the wall that I think is almost as good as mine. Not that, and maybe mine is the best still, but maybe I might even, I might find one that's better than the one that myself and my 2 colleagues worked on. And so they're all numbered. And we want to keep some secret voting going on so that people aren't influenced by the voting of others. I'm not a fan of sticking dots on these things because the group has a tendency to migrate towards the ones that the dots are on. So they're numbered. So what I do is I'm going to write down on a Post-it my first choice and then my second choice, but not my own, right? So if mine was number 3, you'd never see a 3 on my Post-it. Now you have to trust your people, and people need to behave maturely and honorably in doing this. Then somewhere else, maybe behind a flip chart, on another flip chart, as people vote their numbers, they bring their number up and they stick it on, with the Post-it on the flip chart. So you start to see on the other side, because we don't want to influence the people that are looking around at the other proposals, you start to see on the other side where the energy of the group is. And there'll be 1 or 2 that seem stronger. You can do it again in terms of finding the strongest one. Now, you're not done. That's the one then that you fold into using point to make it stronger, using some of the best thinking from the others. How close to target are you with that one? And what would it be needed to get others who think it's not quite right, to get them to the point where they're ready to do that improvement? And so that's how you do it at a structural level. Now, let's go up and chunk up one more. And this point tool, you'll see in the links a way you'll see that with descriptions, but ultimately you're probably going to want to get this. So, and this will be, I'm going to let people have this, and there are hyperlinks on the electronic version of it. So this is a planning, leadership and governance meetings, a productive thinking process guide. See, the problem in my viewpoint isn't the particular solutions that we're coming up with, but that we're putting good minds into those solutions using a process oftentimes that is not as creative as it could be, so the outcomes are not as robust as they might be. So what this is it follows the creative problem-solving process. Now, the creative problem-solving process, I'll move my flip chart and you'll actually be able to see a poster on the wall with it, I think. Yeah, you can see that. That's the blue one in the middle. It's 6 steps. And you'll see that this thing is 6 steps, 3 on each side. And it is these things. And it's not just about generating ideas. Your goal, your wish, your challenge, you got to get articulate about that. The goal or your wish is kids learn that parents can go to work, and that people, those 3 main criteria, right? Kids learn, kids socialize, that's 1. Parents go to work, and COVID is less transferred than it might be if we weren't attending to that question, right? That's the 4 things, I guess, that most of us are paying most attention to in terms of how do we thread that in a way that works. And so then you gather data, and you do that in a more intentional way. It's the second step of it. And there's, what do you know? What are others doing? What are the dynamics of transfer? All the things. And we've all done a lot of learning, whether you wanted to or not, over the last 6 months about, coronavirus transmission and this particular COVID-19 disease state that we're getting. And only then do you start to generate some ideas or clarify, you clarify the problems that you've got to deal with. So if this is here's your goal, here's what we know about that. What are the problems we have to solve? And again, the problems are stated in the form of a question. And then you prioritize those problems, and only then do you start to generate ideas. Let me get my mirroring correct here. Only then do you start to generate ideas about how to solve the most salient problems. The goal of opening schools, or the goal of educating children, it's just a goal. It's not a problem to solve. There are many other jobs to be done in order to open schools or allow kids to learn virtually. And so what are the problems? And you might even break into smaller teams that were focused on particular aspects. Maybe one problem, and a lot of schools felt this towards the end of the year as we started last year, how do we deal with the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, to allow kids to learn from home was a serious issue. So this cheat sheet essentially walks you through it. And in the electronic version of it, and I don't know if you'll see this, yeah, you're probably good with this newer camera, you can see some color there in different spots instead of the black ink. Each one of those is analogous to a hyperlink that takes you to the tool that you would use in that process. So I'm going to make sure that that's available to you. It's going to take me a little bit this morning, and I've got a doctor's appointment that I got to get to at some point, but to get that into the system. Suffice it to say that it is possible to come up with as best a solution as is possible. but most of us are going to be a little shy of as good as we could be. There will not likely be a perfect solution, although we should remain open to some amazing innovation that might do this. Maybe, who knows, maybe finally we can do the Vulcan mind meld, or finally we'll be able to figure out how to grok. But bar that, it's unlikely that we're going to cause great education with no risk of either low socialization or high disease state. These are going to be the challenges, the polarity that we have to manage. And there are a lot of other tools and techniques that you can learn. My request, my inspiration, my desire for all of us is that as we are narrowing in on the reality that the decisions will have to be made about what we're going to do with education during a pandemic, that we make as wise a decision as possible. And what we know is that although we all feel good about ourselves, none of us is a perfect genius. None of us knows everything that could be known. But if we can pull the most inclusive thinking from the broadest groups of well-intentioned, mature minds, and I mean it that way, you got to do the work, that we're trying to solve, not trying to win to a viewpoint, but we're trying to solve a problem together. We're more likely to find a robust solution if we use the creative problem-solving process. If we can't use the whole process, then what we want to do is maybe just strengthen the pieces that we have. And if we can't do that as a group, individually, I could add value by looking at any proposal and thinking creatively what might be all the ways to overcome any of the objections I have to that proposal. Together, we'll do the best that we can. But the variable is how together we are in our thinking, not how much we agree, but how much we will think together, and how wise of a process that we use is, I guess would be the way the sentence, if I wrote it, wouldn't sound right, but how wise we are in the process choices we make to come to those decisions. I'm Bob Eckert at New and Improved. If you follow us, you'll find a lot of these tools available. And I remain here as your servant to do what I can to increase the likelihood that we get through this pandemic as well as we can, as gracefully as we can, and as healthily as we can. Feel free to share this widely and enjoy the time you have.